Yo, what is up, boys? It is your boy Zether here, back at it again with another video. This being, what if Deku was born with Mob's powers? The last part did pretty well, and a lot of you guys actually seem to enjoy the video, seeing as, well, a lot of you guys wanted it in the first place, so I'm here to deliver part 2. And if you guys smash the like goal of, let's see, what's something good? Let's say 200 likes, I will be finishing the series without any other like goals. But yeah, with that being said though, guys, I don't want to waste your guys' time, so we're just gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, so where the second part's all going to start off is right after Deku had basically done great in the quirk assessment. He had basically just done great, and everybody was basically looking at him like his power was incredibly amazing. Deku would basically be thinking to himself whether that was the right way to use his powers and whether his mom would have, been happy with that. I mean, yeah, sure, he has great powers and a lot of potential, but he doesn't know if it was the great thing to use it just to pass a little quirk assessments. I mean, if he didn't, he was gonna fail out of UA, but was that really the right way to use his powers? He'd basically just shrug it off as he would proceed to basically walk home, and this is when Bakugo would come in from behind. As he would be about halfway home, Bakugo would essentially just look at Deku and he would say, "Hey, Deku, what was that? What were those powers? I thought you were quirkless." As Deku would look at Bakugo, he would tell him he's not quirkless. He just never used his quirk in a flashy way because his mom always told him that, well, he's never supposed to just show it off. He's only supposed to use it for good. As Bakugo would say, "Good? So you decided to just let me mess with you all those years for no reason? You could have done something about it. You could have maybe pushed me even harder than I already was. But instead, you decided to hide this secret from me. Why? Did you always think you were better than me or something? Did you think you were stronger than me?" As Deku would look at Bakugo, he would say, No, Bakugo, it's nothing like that. That's not at all what I was thinking. I just didn't want to use my..." As Bakugo would shoot an explosion at Deku's face, sending him crashing into a building, Deku would get back up as Bakugo would then look at him and say, "Well, this time you're not getting out of it so easy." As he would go, "Ah!" and launch an explosion right at Deku. Deku would basically use his psychic powers to push Bakugo back and just keep him from hurting himself. As basically Deku would continue walking home, as Bakugo just trying to launch attacks at Deku, Deku would be paying no mind to Bakugo, which would anger him more and more. And Bakugo, after about 5 minutes and Deku was outside his house, he decided to walk home and just basically train for the rest of the day. As Deku would walk inside, and he would basically proceed to ask his mother if, well, what he's doing is right. He's not using his powers to be a show-off or anything, and things seem to be working out, but Bakugo doesn't like that. Inko would proceed to tell Deku that, yeah, he's doing the right thing, as she would proceed to tell Deku, as that he's doing everything right. As if he got first place, he must be doing something well. As Deku would say, yeah, but it feels a little different. And Inko would tell him that it's all right, like he's doing the best he can, And Inko at this point doesn't know that Deku is limiting himself so much. When she told him not to use his powers for flashiness, she didn't mean never use them. She just basically meant not to try to be like Bakugo. She didn't want Deku to feel overconfident because of those amazing powers of his, and she didn't want Deku to go down the wrong path. She always wanted him to be a genuine hero, and that's what he is. He's a genuine kid with a pure heart and, well, an amazing goal to become the #1 hero. She would not know that Deku's limiting himself so much and that this is causing that much of a problem for him. If she did, she'd probably tell Deku not to do that anymore, to use his powers the way that he sees fit. But like I said, she doesn't know. So yeah, Deku would proceed to basically go to sleep, and the very next day he would wake up for a normal day of school. That day there would pretty much be no real anything going on in that day, so we're just gonna skip on over to the day of the heroes versus villains thing, where they're all basically on their last class, and this is when Aizawa would basically just be on the board telling them to get ready because someone's gonna walk in through that door soon. This is when All Might would basically bust in through the door saying, "I am here," walking in like a normal person, as Deku would look at All Might and he would immediately begin to fanboy his ASS off, as he would look towards All Might and say, All Might, it's you." All Might would look at him and say, "Ah, yes, I remember you, young man. You were the young man who helped me, take away the sludge villain. I appreciate you. As he'd basically look at the rest of the class and tell them all that, they all need to get suited up because the clothes make the pros. As they would all get all suited up, and the little background music would start playing. My hero. That stuff. That was a little cringe, but whatever. Anyways, that being said, Deku would proceed to essentially just get changed as he would walk outside, and his outfit would be the same one that he would worn in canon. His mother would have still made him that same outfit, and Deku would of course still be paired up with Uraraka against Bakugo and Ida. All Might wouldn't really know about the tension that's going on between the both of them, since he wasn't there the day before, and All Might had given one for all to Mirio instead of Deku, seeing as he trained him. But yeah, Deku is about the same physical level that he was in the original, so as soon as everything gets started, Deku would basically make the same plan with Uraraka, and he would still end up slamming Bakugo onto the ground just like he had done in canon, catching Bakugo off guard because his rage was blinding him from making some smart decisions. After that, Bakugo would get up and launch an explosion at Deku, as Uraraka would have basically just been looking for the bomb. As Deku would proceed to basically start dodging, he would begin to get very hard for him to dodge Bakugo's attacks, as he would decide that this is not the time and place to use his abilities. There's no real danger and this is just a little test. It's not going to affect him in any way. So he would just be using nothing but his physical strength, and that would do horrible things. He would proceed to get bodied by Bakugo, as Bakugo would be launching explosions upon explosions on him, saying, "Well, you've been hiding from me all these years? You think you're better than me, Deku? Well, no. You're done for!" As he would proceed to shoot a bunch of explosions at Deku's body, tearing up his suit, and All Might would have to yell through the commission thing to tell him that he needs to stop right now. He's being way too aggressive for just a little exam. As Bakugo would crush the device in his ear, he would look towards Deku and say that, "All these years you were looking down on me as if I was some sort of ant. I thought you were weak, but look at you. You were ridiculing me behind my back, weren't you, Deku?" As Deku would look at Bakugo, he'd proceed to say that, no, he wasn't. As Bakugo would look at him and say goodnight, Deku. He'd proceed to pull the pin on his explosion gauntlet, and he would shoot that straight at Deku, sending him crashing into the wall, knocking him out. And All Might would proceed to bust in through the building as he would restrain Bakugo and knock him out. As he would proceed to run over to Uraraka and call off everything. He would tell Ida to call everything off, as the day would pretty much end there, and All Might would say that, the class is over, class is dismissed. The rest of them can have this portion tomorrow, but in terms of Bakugo, he needs to be dealt with accordingly. As he would take Bakugo to the principal's office, and Nezu and All Might would discuss everything with Bakugo. Bakugo at this point would still be raging and just basically angry, as at this point his rage is just blinding him. He doesn't see things clearly. He's saying everything in black and white when in reality it's gray. He doesn't know the full story of why Deku's the way he is, and he would proceed to basically get expelled from UA. Bakugo would walk into the building with Nezu, as Nezu would ask him why he did what he did. Bakugo would proceed to say that quirkless Deku didn't show him the power that he had, and he thought that maybe if he went all out on him, he would be tempted to use the power just to defend himself. With Nezu saying that he understands that, maybe he has some rage or some issues with Deku outside of school, but he can't be doing that to other students. What if that blast would have killed him? What would have happened then, huh? As Bakugo would sit there in silence, basically not saying anything, Nezu would proceed to look at Bakugo as he would say that he can't have anybody like that in his school. He might as well be a villain if he keeps going down this path, so he's going to be expelling Bakugo. And Bakugo would proceed to basically widen his eyes, as Mitsuki would be called in 30 minutes later, and she would hear what Bakugo had done, and she would get enraged at Bakugo. She would say that was incredibly awful thing to do to Deku. "Isn't that your childhood friend?" she would say. "You're supposed to be friends with that kid, not just acting as if he's some nobody who just gets to get pushed around by you. You have to treat him with more respect, Bakugo." As Bakugo would look at his mom and scoff as he's angry, and he runs out of the room saying, "Whatever, I don't need the school anyways. I'll become a hero another way. And if I can't do that, then we'll get there when we get to that bridge." Bakugo would leave the school, and at this point we would switch over to Deku's perspective, as he's in Recovery Girl's office, and he would essentially just be laying down there. As he would look towards her and ask her what happened, she would explain the situation to Deku, and Deku would just be thinking that he hopes Bakugo doesn't get expelled. If he would have just used his powers, maybe this outcome would have been differently. Maybe Bakugo wouldn't have gotten expelled at all, and maybe they could have been on equal terms or something. But Deku just lays down as he heals up for the next couple of hours and then goes home. Very next day, Deku would walk into class as Bakugo was nowhere to be seen, and he wondered if maybe he got suspended or, in school detention. As Deku would think nothing of it, and days would go by, and Bakugo would just not come to school. At this point, Bakugo had basically just been trying to get into other schools, but no other school would accept him. They heard about what happened in UA, and none of them want somebody who acts like that in their hero course. That wouldn't represent a good image on them. So Bakugo would just be stuck without any hero school. Deku would go into the office on the same day, and he would ask Principal Nezu what happened, as Nezu would look at Deku and say, "Ah, yes, Midoriya, have a seat." As Deku would have a seat and ask Nezu what happened with Bakugo. Did he get suspended for like a long time or something? As Nezu would say, "Oh yes, Bakugo, yeah, we expelled him. After what happened in the, Heroes versus Villains, we decided that it was in our best interest to get him out of here since he was just not a great fit for UA." As Deku would immediately be shocked, he would say that, it was his fault, that Bakugo should be let back in. Bakugo was just angry at, Deku, and if Deku would have just, showed off his quirk, maybe all of this could have been avoided. As Nezu would proceed to essentially just tell Deku that, well, if he would have calmed down and actually showed real hero behavior, he would have not been expelled from the school. There's nothing he can do about it. And Deku would look at Nezu as he would say he understands, but just to please take this into consideration. Principal Nezu would sit there in silence after hearing the kid who pretty much got destroyed by him stand up on Bakugo's behalf. He would think that that kid is really something if he's willing to, stand up for the same kid who hurt him the way he did. As Nezu would take it into consideration that maybe Bakugo should be let back in, but, that's gonna come to another situation when we come to it. I'm going to be posting a poll same day that this video comes out, the same hour, hopefully, if I'm not too busy. Yeah, the same hour. Yeah, I should be able to do that. And I'm basically just going to be asking you guys, do you guys want me to go down the villain route with Bakugo, with him basically just saying enough is enough and just going with the League of Villains and being present in the USJ attack? Or do you guys want me to essentially have him just pretty much what's it called? Just pretty much go back to school and be let back in for the USJ? Or after the USJ, actually. Yeah, it would be for the sports festival. Or no, Bakugo wouldn't even be let into the sports festival after what he did as a punishment. Basically, take a vote in the community tab below after you see this video. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. Should Bakugo be let back in? Or should I permanently expel him and make him a villain that Deku has to face later on? Whichever one you guys choose, I'm going to be happy to do that situation. But with that being said, Deku would walk out of the building with Nezu, and he would proceed to go to his classes. As this is when Deku would walk up to Uraraka, and she would say, "Hey Deku, I'm glad to see you. How are you feeling after what happened with Bakugo? Sorry I haven't mentioned it. I just didn't want to, I'll talk about that anytime soon after it happened." As Deku would look at Uraraka, he would say that he was actually fine. As Uraraka would basically look at Deku and say, "Great. Well, Deku, do you maybe want to hang out after school today?" As Deku would look at Uraraka and say, sure, what do you have in mind?" Uraraka would immediately go red after she realized what she asked Deku, and she would run out of the room as Deku just left their speeches, kind of like, what just happened? Deku would continue with the rest of the class, and at the end of the day, Uraraka would basically walk up to Deku and she says sorry that she freaked out. She's got a little nervous. She's never actually gone out with another guy before. As Deku would say that, "Oh, it's completely fine," and he would start chuckling, saying that, yeah, he knows that feeling. When he first talked to her and he stayed silent, it was because, she's kind of one of the first girls he's ever talked to. Uraraka would laugh at that and she would say, "So, Deku, want to go get a bite to eat after school? Maybe let's go to the mall." As Deku would agree to that, and after this, they would both basically walk to the mall after school in their school uniforms. As soon as they would take a couple steps in the mall, a couple people would walk up to them as they would say, "Hey, you guys are UA students, right? You guys attend the prestigious school, right? How is it? Is it true that All Might works there?" They'd begin to ask them stuff, and Deku and Uraraka would basically just answer some questions and ignore them. After a little bit of time, they would both decide that, yeah, they're gonna have to basically try to be a little low-key. As they would take off their school jackets, and they would both just be wearing like a white shirt under that. Uraraka would be wearing like a crop top or whatever, and Deku would be wearing just a nice little white t-shirt, right? It makes his body look a little decent since, at this point Deku has been training a little more and he's pretty ripped. And In terms of his haircut, this man, he ain't slacking. He ain't slacking. This version of Deku's hair isn't long and nappy like the normal one, and it's actually more maintained and done. And Deku is also wearing a watch as well as a pair of white shoes. Deku would be walking with Uraraka, and she would just be looking at him, just like staring at him in a different way than she usually does. As her eyes, like her face would go red, and Deku would ask her what's wrong. And she would say, "It's nothing," and she'd proceed to try to run away. But Deku would grab her by like the hand and ask her if she's okay. You know, does she have a fever or something? He would put his hand on her head as he'd proceed to basically heal her, and all of like the stress that she had and like all the negative energy just gone. She'd proceed to just be a light of positivity, and she'd say, "Hey Deku, wanna go grab a pretzel?" As Deku would look at her and say, "Sure." As they'd basically go over to Retzel's Pretzels, if you guys know where that is, and they'd basically proceed to just get some pretzels. Deku would get my favorite, which is, you know, the pepperoni with, the pepperoni pretzel, and Uraraka would get some Cinnabits. As she would basically proceed to just walk around with Deku for the mall a little longer. As they're basically walking around, some guys would walk up to them, as, you know, they'd walk up to Uraraka and begin to just say that, you know, she actually looks kind of cute. As they'd start to follow Deku and Uraraka, who are walking with each other, and they would ask her if, you know, they're on a date, which Uraraka would say no, they're not. And one of the guys would actually say that's perfect, as he'd wrap his arm around Uraraka. This would kind of anger Deku, but he'd kind of just not really say anything. As he'd continue to walk, and those three guys are basically just walking with Deku, as they're all essentially just pushing him to the back, and Deku's, you know, his time with his friend is just being ruined. Or that's how Deku's looking at it. He doesn't really have a crush on her at this point, but something about it just making him jealous. Deku would proceed to basically wave his hand at the kids, as he'd say, "Hey guys, I'm kind of here with my friend. Is it okay if you guys like let us, you know, just hang out together?" As they would say, "What, you got a crush on her or something? Too late, man. You lost your chance. You should have maybe called this a date, and maybe we would have left." As Deku would basically just kind of stay silent, he'd proceed to look at the kids, as he would just say, "Yeah." And Uraraka would basically proceed to look at the three of them, and she'd get angry and say, "Hey, he asked you guys to go. I'm not interested, okay?" As they'd look at her and they'd say, "Come on," as they start surrounding her. Immediately, as Deku sees what's going on, he'd stop time. As he would just push those kids aside, and he'd tell Uraraka to just walk away. As she would ask him what's going on, everybody's standing still. As Deku would say that he stopped time for them to just basically just be left behind, and them to enjoy the rest of their day. As Uraraka would smile and say that that's perfect. As Deku would look at her and say, "Yeah, a little some." As they'd proceed to finish up their day at the mall, and this is when they would walk to Deku's house. As Deku would basically ask her if she's hungry, and she basically comes over for dinner. You know, she's not trying to have a little ramen cup today. She wants to have real food. So, you know, she goes to Deku's house and meets Inko. As Inko immediately after seeing Uraraka would say, "Hey, so you're Deku's little special lady." As Deku would look at his mom and say, "No, mom, this is just a friend." As she'd say, "That's how it starts. I remember how me and your father were." As Uraraka's face would go red, and she'd say, "See, she got it for you." As Uraraka would basically just look at Deku's mom and just be bright red in the face. As Deku would ask her if she's okay, you know, maybe she has a fever again. Deku's mom would just kind of face palm and say, "No," she'd just stay quiet. And she'd look towards Uraraka's direction, and she would say, "If you want to date my son, just be super sweet to him. He'll start liking you back. Don't worry." As Uraraka would get even more red, and she'd say, I gotta go." After, you know, eating the rest of her food, Deku would ask her if she wants him to walk him home. And Deku would proceed to basically just say, "Okay, Uraraka, well, have a good day." As Uraraka would proceed to basically leave the house, Deku would look at his mom and say that was pretty strange. You know, she wasn't acting like that before. As Deku's mom, or Inko, would look at him and say, "Yeah, girl stuff." As Deku would say, "Okay." This would basically lead into Deku essentially getting a text from All Might and meeting All Might at the beach. As he would begin to explain to Deku that he's sorry he hasn't been talking to him that much, but, you know, he was basically just, you know, keeping up with his stuff at school. You know, he's a little busy, and his hero work stuff is kind of hard to keep up with. As he would ask Deku, you know, how's he doing? As Deku would say, "Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I thought that maybe Bakugo would get suspended or a couple of days away from school, but I didn't expect for him to get expelled. I kind of feel like it was my fault." As All Might would look at Deku and just see that Deku's actually feeling bad. he would look towards him as he would say, I'll try to talk to Principal Nezu as soon as I can, but in terms of what Bakugo did, he kind of got what he deserved. I mean, what he did to you was pretty unacceptable, and anybody at UA should not behave that way. As Deku would say that he understands, but maybe it was his fault a little bit. He always did hide his powers from him, and Bakugo probably just felt as if, he felt he was better than him or something. As All Might would listen to this, and he would then proceed to tell Deku not to worry about it, that he'll talk to Principal Nezu. Deku would look at All Might and thank him for that, and he would then begin to look at him like, as he would say, All Might, I appreciate everything you've done for me. You took me from being a scrawny kid who honestly couldn't even lift up a 5-pound weight to now being pretty confident in myself, and now I have a lot more friends than I did before you were ever around. Thank you, All Might. As All Might would look at Deku, and this is where I'm going to be ending off the video. And yeah, if you guys want to find out whether Bakugo does or doesn't get back into UA, then make sure to go to my community tab and basically comment down below what you guys think should happen. Comment down below whether yes or no, and what you think should happen with the series carrying on. Let me know why you guys believe Bakugo should get kicked out permanently, or let me know why you guys think he should be let back in. I have a feeling that a lot of you guys will say the villain route. But yeah, that being said though, guys, if you guys want the next part, make sure you guys break 200 likes on this video. But with that being said though, it has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace.